I was sitting on the balcony of a luxury hotel in Tokyo, watching the sun dip below the skyline. The air was thick with humidity, but the view made it worth it. A perfect end to a long and stressful day. I'd just finished delivering a presentation to a group of investors, and the pressure was finally starting to ease. As I took a slow sip of my drink, my phone buzzed on the table, and I glanced down at the screen. Clara. I didn't even think twice as I swiped to answer. "Hey," I said, my voice a little hoarse from hours of talking. "What's up?" Her voice was cold, clipped, not the kind of tone I was used to. "Ethan, I need to talk to you about something." I sat up, the lightness of the moment vanishing. "What's going on?" "I'm leaving you," she said, like she was stating the weather. "I'm pregnant, and I'm with someone else." The words didn't quite register at first. I blinked, forcing myself to focus on her words. "What?" Clara sighed heavily, her breath shaky as if she was rehearsing this moment. "I've already sold the penthouse, the sports car, everything. I don't need you anymore." There was a beat of silence, and I could hear her waiting for some kind of explosion, some kind of reaction. I knew this was supposed to be the moment I lost it, where the man she thought I was would come through, angry, devastated, demanding answers. But instead, all I could say was, "All right." She went silent, probably expecting me to beg or shout, to cry or plead. But I wasn't going to give her that. Not anymore. Not after everything. I felt a dull ache in my chest, but the anger wasn't there. It hadn't been there for a long time. "I'm done with this, Ethan. I'm done pretending. You're not the man I want anymore." Her voice shook as she said it, but I couldn't bring myself to feel anything, not even pity. "I'll have the lawyer send you the papers," she added, her tone softening a bit, like she was worried about my reaction. "Sure," I said. "Goodbye, Clara." I hung up before she could say anything else. The moment the call ended, I leaned back in my chair, staring out over the city. My fingers wrapped around the glass, but I barely tasted the drink. Clara had always thought she could control me with her manipulations, her tantrums, her affairs, her games. But this time, I was done. I wasn't going to beg her to stay. I wasn't going to fight for her love. I had spent the last few years bending over backward for her, for a woman who never saw me as anything more than a tool to get what she wanted. I stood up slowly, watching the sunset cast long shadows over the city. There was only one thing left to do now. I would play her game, but I wouldn't be the one who lost. Clara thought she could break me. She thought this was her victory. She had no idea what I was capable of. 3 days later, I was back at JFK Airport. The exhaustion from my trip to Tokyo still weighed heavy on my shoulders, but it was nothing compared to the cold knot in my stomach. I had told Clara, "all right," and walked away from her call without a single emotion breaking through. But the truth was, it wasn't over. I knew she'd be waiting for me when I returned. I'd half expected it, the way she always thought she could hold some kind of power over me, her final attempt to shake me, to rattle me enough that I would beg her to stay. She had no idea who she was dealing with now. As I walked toward baggage claim, the last thing I expected was to see her. But there she was, standing in the terminal, with that desperate look in her eyes. Her usually impeccable appearance was in disarray. Her designer clothes were rumpled, her makeup smeared from the sleepless nights she'd no doubt spent contemplating her next move. Despite her high heels and tailored jacket, she looked like a woman who had lost control. She spotted me immediately, her eyes narrowing with frustration. Then she started toward me, her heels clicking loudly against the tile floor. I could feel the weight of her gaze as she came closer. "Ethan," she called out, her voice more urgent than usual. "We need to talk." I stopped walking, but didn't turn to face her immediately. My hand instinctively reached into my coat pocket, feeling the crisp envelope I had tucked there earlier that day. I had prepared for this. Prepared for her to chase after me, to demand answers that I wasn't about to give. She was already standing in front of me now, blocking my path, hands on her hips as if this was still a negotiation. "I don't understand, Ethan," she said, her voice tight with the tension of trying to maintain control. You just walk away like it's nothing?" I turned slowly to face her, my expression blank. "It's nothing, Clara. It's done." She laughed, but there was no humor in it. "You can't be serious. I just told you I'm pregnant and you don't care?" My gaze didn't shift from hers. "I care, but it's not mine." Her face twisted in confusion. "What are you talking about?" I took the envelope from my pocket and held it out to her. "This is the eviction notice for the penthouse." "And this," I paused, watching her eyes flicker with mounting panic as she reached for the envelope. Is the paternity test, proving that the child you're carrying isn't mine. She froze for a moment, staring down at the papers in her hand. The color drained from her face as she flipped through them, the shock on her face clear. The moment felt like it stretched on forever, the sound of her breath catching in her throat hanging in the air. You had no right to do this, she said, her voice trembling with a mix of anger and disbelief. But I could see the cracks forming, her power, her control over me, slipping away with every word that she read. I didn't respond, just turned and started walking past her. I wasn't interested in arguments or explanations. I had no need to hear her excuses. Ethan, she called after me, but I didn't stop. I didn't look back either. I was done. 3 months earlier, I was still convinced that everything was fine. Our 3-year marriage, once filled with laughter and promise, had slowly become a routine of long hours at work, barely a glance exchanged over dinner. Clara had become distant, her once affectionate gestures now few and far between. She would bury herself in her phone, eyes glued to it long after we finished eating. Her responses to my questions were short, clipped. It didn't make sense to me at first, but over time, I began to notice the small things. She would roll her eyes when I tried to talk about our future, our house, our life together, plans I thought we were still building. The subtle comments she made about my work, how I was always too focused on it, began to sound less like concern and more like contempt. I told myself it was just the stress of her boutique art studio, the one she had been trying and failing to get off the ground. But deep down, I knew it wasn't just that. It started with the late-night phone calls, the hushed conversations that always seemed to happen when I wasn't around. At first, I told myself it was nothing. Maybe she was catching up with a friend, maybe a business call about her studio. But when I began to see her sneaking out onto the balcony to take these calls, I started to feel a knot of suspicion tighten in my stomach. Why not take the call in the living room, where we could both hear it? Why the secrecy? I couldn't bring myself to confront her, not yet. Instead, I did something I never thought I would. I installed hidden cameras in the penthouse. It wasn't just about her being distant anymore. I couldn't ignore the little red flags anymore. Something wasn't right. As soon as I left for Tokyo, I had access to the feed. The first few days were uneventful, just Clara going about her day as usual. But then, I saw it. The feed recorded Clara in the living room one evening with a man I didn't recognize. He was younger than me, tattooed, with a scruffy beard. My breath caught as I watched them laugh together, her hand resting on his arm. And then, he leaned in and kissed her. I shut the laptop with a snap, my heart pounding in my chest. I didn't need to see more. I already knew. The betrayal wasn't just emotional, it was physical. Later that night, I watched again, unable to look away. Clara and the man, whom I now knew was a boxing trainer, were sitting on the couch, sipping whiskey, the rare bottle I had gifted her. I hadn't even realized how much I'd given up for her. The camera caught the conversation. "Ethan's so boring," Clara said, laughing. "He works too much, doesn't know how to have fun." The words hit me like a fist to the gut. I had worked tirelessly for our future, for her future. And this was how she saw me, a dull, predictable man. The man who had supported her, financially and emotionally, while she chased her dreams of a boutique she could never keep afloat. My hands trembled as I closed the laptop. I couldn't look at it anymore. The pain was sharper than anything I had expected, but I didn't cry. I didn't yell. I didn't even feel anger at that moment. Only a deep, consuming disappointment. I had been living in a delusion. Every time I thought I was building something real, she had been taking it all for granted. And now, I knew I had to act. There was no more pretending, no more waiting for her to come around. I wasn't just going to confront her about the affair. I was going to make sure she understood the full extent of what she had lost. This wasn't just about the betrayal anymore. This was about regaining control of my life. The moment I walked back through that door, everything would change. I didn't act immediately. That wasn't my style. Instead, I let Clara believe she had the upper hand, letting her grow more arrogant, more reckless. I watched her from the distance, waiting for the right moment. In the meantime, I did what I had to do. I moved quickly, but carefully. The penthouse, once a symbol of our shared life, was transferred to my brother's name. He had no idea what was happening, but I trusted him more than anyone else in my family. The sports car I'd once adored, the one Clara was so eager to sell, was no longer mine. I had put it under my company's lease, giving me an airtight excuse for not letting her get rid of it. Accounts were frozen, assets carefully moved. Clara thought she was stripping me of everything, of the life we had built. She believed she could walk away with the spoils, leaving me with nothing but the dust of our ruined marriage. What she didn't know was that I had already ensured I wouldn't be left in the gutter. I didn't confront her. Not yet. I let her think she had succeeded, let her believe she had control, that she had outsmarted me. I let her arrogance grow, just as I'd planned. Every time I saw her dismissive smile, every time she said something about how she was better off without me, I smiled to myself. But in the silence of my new apartment, free from her presence, I had time to think. I thought about the resentment that had been simmering beneath the surface of our marriage for so long. The way I had sacrificed so much for her art studio, her boutique dreams that had never taken off. The hours I worked, the money I spent, all to see her always dissatisfied, always chasing something that never made her happy. I thought back to when she had first pitched the idea of her art studio. She'd been so excited. She told me it would be her way of finally being her own person, free of the expectations of family and society. I'd believed in her. I'd poured money into the idea, watching her run through it like it was nothing more than a whim. And when that failed, when the studio didn't take off, when she started resenting the lack of success, she blamed me. She blamed me for not being more passionate, for not being able to support her dream in a way that matched her expectations. But what she failed to understand was that it wasn't just money I was investing in her. It was my time, my energy, my entire focus. But I couldn't keep doing it. I couldn't keep bending to her whims. I had let myself become her shadow, and I knew I needed to break free. One thing I'd learned in the past few months was that I didn't need her. I didn't need her approval, her constant demand for validation. And I sure as hell didn't need her to tell me how to live my life. Her behavior only made my resolve stronger. Every time I watched her growing arrogance, her attempt to play the victim while taking what wasn't hers, I knew I had made the right decision. The moment I let go of that penthouse, that car, those assets, I wasn't just letting go of physical things. I was letting go of everything she had ever tried to take from me. My peace, my trust, my sense of self. She was running out of moves, and I was just getting started. I wasn't sure what she expected from me, but I knew it wasn't what was about to happen. Clara called me 2 days after the airport incident, her voice a mix of feigned calmness and desperation. She wanted to meet at a diner, somewhere neutral, she said, where we could talk. I wasn't interested in reconciliation, but I agreed. I wanted to see what story she would spin this time. When I arrived, she was already seated at a booth near the back, a cup of coffee in front of her, stirring it absently. The first thing I noticed was how she looked, still dressed in the sharp designer clothes she had always favored, but the edge was gone from her. She looked tired. Her makeup was slightly smudged, and there was a hollow look in her eyes that hadn't been there before. She glanced up as I approached, a strained smile pulling at the corners of her lips. "Ethan," she said, her voice soft, almost pleading. "I'm glad you came." I slid into the booth across from her, not bothering to greet her beyond a short nod. "What's this about?" She sighed, looking down at her coffee before looking back up at me. "I don't know how to say this, but I'm sorry. I think we need to talk about us, about what happened." I didn't respond immediately. I just watched her, waiting for her to continue. She seemed to take my silence as an invitation to speak more, the words tumbling out. "You've been so focused on work lately," she started, her voice almost accusatory. "I've been telling you, but you didn't listen. I need more, Ethan. More passion, more attention, more love." I stared at her, my gaze steady. She was trying to manipulate me, using the same tired excuses she had used before, and I was done with it. "You want passion?" I asked flatly. "Is that what you wanted from me? Passion?" Her eyes flickered with something I couldn't quite place, but she nodded, her expression softening. "I wanted to feel like I mattered, you know? You've always been so focused on work. I thought, if I had your attention, we could fix things. But then I met someone else." The words hit me like a punch to the stomach, but I didn't flinch. I just kept my eyes on her, watching her shift uncomfortably in the booth. She wasn't even ashamed of it. She was trying to make me feel guilty for being too focused on work, while she carried on an affair right under my nose. "I know you met someone," I said, my voice calm. "I watched the footage, Clara," her face drained of color, her hand trembling slightly around the coffee cup. "You... what?" "The boxing trainer," I continued. "I know everything." She opened her mouth, but no words came out at first. She was struggling to maintain her composure, but it was slipping. Ethan, I didn't. I raised a hand, cutting her off. Don't bother, I said, my tone colder now. You think I don't know? You think I didn't see you mocking me to him, calling me boring, drinking my rare whiskey like it meant nothing? She looked down, her face crumpling as if the weight of everything she had done was finally hitting her. I wasn't angry, I wasn't furious, I was just done. You destroyed us, Clara, I continued. You betrayed me. You sold our life, and now you're sitting here asking for sympathy? For me to feel sorry for you? Her eyes welled up with tears, but I didn't feel the need to comfort her. Not anymore. Not after everything. I'm not here to reconcile, I said, standing up from the booth. I'm here because I need you to understand something. I'm done being the man you can control. I'm done pretending everything's okay. Her lips trembled as she opened her mouth, but I didn't let her speak. I turned, walking out of the diner without another word, leaving her there, stunned, humiliated, exposed for the liar she was. As I stepped out into the cool air, I didn't feel victorious. I didn't feel angry. I felt nothing. It was a strange kind of peace, knowing that for once I had taken control of my own life. And Clara, she was left to deal with the consequences of her actions, all alone. The apartment felt quiet, too quiet. When I walked through the door of my new place, it was as if the weight of the past few years had been removed from my shoulders. The minimalist decor, just the basics, a bed, a few pieces of furniture, matched the new chapter I was trying to begin. I had left behind the penthouse, the chaos of Clara's presence, her manipulations, and her demands. Now, there was nothing but space. I liked it that way. I spent the first couple of days settling in, cleaning up the remnants of our life together. It felt surreal to be alone, not just physically, but emotionally, for the first time in years. Clara wasn't here to fight or blame me. She wasn't here to demand more, to play her games. Yet, the more I unpacked the boxes, the more I realized how much of myself I had lost in that marriage. How much of my time, my energy, and my identity I had sacrificed for her, and for what? A boutique art studio that never really took off? A woman who used my devotion to her as an excuse to cheat on me? I had given everything, and she had taken it, without so much as a second thought. I stared at the small TV I had set up in the corner of the living room, the only entertainment I'd brought with me. As the screen flickered to life, I absent-mindedly began scrolling through old footage. Clara and I at parties, Clara laughing in the kitchen as I cooked dinner. Moments that seemed so perfect at the time, but now, watching them, I saw the cracks. There she was, laughing with her lover, mocking me. Her voice in that video, so lighthearted and free, calling me boring while they drank my rare whiskey. The betrayal hit me all over again, but this time, there was no anger, no tears. Just a dull ache in the pit of my stomach. What hurt the most wasn't the affair. It wasn't even the lies. It was the realization of how much I had allowed her to take from me. My self-respect, my peace of mind, my sense of worth. I'd been living in a delusion, thinking I could fix things, thinking I could save her from her own failures. I had tried to be everything for her, and in return, she made me feel like nothing. The anger was gone, but the disappointment, that was there, deep and gnawing. I didn't want to hold on to it. I knew I had to let go of that too. I stood up, walked over to the small drawer in my kitchen, and pulled out the box of wedding photos. They sat there, gathering dust. The moments that had once symbolized my love for her, now just pieces of paper that held nothing but lies. I didn't need them anymore. I didn't need the memory of her, the illusion of a perfect life that never was. I pulled them out one by one, watching the images burn, the flames licking at the edges of the paper, until it was just ash in my hands. It was a strange kind of cleansing, a release. As the last picture curled and blackened, I realized I was no longer tied to her. I had freed myself. This wasn't about revenge. It was about freedom. Freedom from her, from the marriage, from everything she had done to me. I stood there for a moment, letting the silence sink in. It was the first time in a long time that I didn't feel the weight of her presence, the manipulation, the resentment. The apartment was quiet again, but it wasn't empty. This time, it felt like peace. And for the first time in months, I felt something I hadn't felt in a long time. Myself. The first few days after everything with Clara collapsed were strangely quiet. I half expected the phone to ring constantly with her frantic voice on the other end, begging for reconciliation or pleading for something. But when the dust settled, the silence was almost comforting. It was like I had finally drawn the line, and even she, with all her usual theatrics, didn't dare cross it. But then the calls came, not from her, but from others, friends, acquaintances. People I had known over the years, many of whom had always been a little too eager to side with Clara. They all wanted to talk about me. At first it was the usual gossip, the whispers that spread quickly through our social circles. Clara had painted me as the villain, the cold, distant husband who couldn't give her what she needed, the man who would rather work than love. She had a way of spinning things, and I had no doubt her story painted her as the tragic heroine. But what surprised me was the number of people who reached out to tell me they had seen through it. They didn't say it outright. Most of them never would. But I could hear it in their voices, the quiet support, the unspoken understanding. The truth had a way of seeping through the lies. Clara wasn't the angel she made herself out to be, and even the ones who had sided with her once began to see the cracks in her facade. The first blow came when Clara's attempts at spousal support were swiftly crushed. I had made sure to lock everything down. Assets, accounts, everything. My lawyer was more than capable, and Clara's lawyer didn't stand a chance against the airtight defenses I had put in place. No matter how much she tried to claim entitlement, I had already made sure she couldn't take anything from me. My silence had been strategic, my calm, calculated. Then came the bombshell. Clara's lover, the tattooed boxer who had been such a fixture in her life, had dumped her. It didn't surprise me. She was demanding, manipulative, and self-absorbed. She pushed people too far, and eventually they walked away. But hearing that he had abandoned her after a few months, just as the cracks began to show, was almost satisfying in a dark, twisted way. I remember hearing rumors of his criminal background, too. It was all coming back around to her. What she had once tried to turn into a shiny new life was now unraveling. She had built her world on lies, and it was all crumbling down. Meanwhile, I was beginning to rebuild, piece by piece. It wasn't just about financial security. It wasn't about winning or losing. It was about finding myself again, the person I had forgotten while I was busy trying to make her happy. And through it all, my parents were a quiet but unwavering support system. My father never said much, but he didn't need to. His few words to me, when he called to check in, resonated deeply. Sometimes you have to lose what's killing you to find who you are. It was strange, but in those words, I found a renewed sense of strength. Clara had been what was killing me. Not because of the affair, or the lies, or the betrayal, but because I had let her take control of my life for so long. I had allowed her to define my worth, and I was finally done with it. I was starting over, on my own terms, and for the first time in years, I felt free. The days had begun to stretch longer, and the city's noise outside my new apartment became nothing but background hum. I had taken my first real step in a while. I was alone, and I was starting to realize that was exactly what I needed. No more distractions, no more clutter. I spent the first few weeks in a rhythm I never thought I'd have the courage to create. I woke up early every day, sometimes before the sun had even fully risen, and I ran. It was something I had neglected for so long, but now I relished the quiet mornings, the time to be by myself, to focus on my breath, to feel my muscles ache. It was hard at first. My body wasn't used to it, but it felt good. It felt like me again. Each morning I laced up my sneakers, I felt a little more like the person I had been before Clara. The man who wasn't caught up in someone else's wants and needs, who didn't spend every waking moment trying to fix things for people who didn't appreciate it. Each step was a reminder that I had my own strength, and each drop of sweat was one less thing I had to carry from the past. At night, I started cooking for myself. Nothing fancy, just simple, wholesome meals. It was odd at first, preparing meals for one after all those years of cooking for the two of us. But the process became something I looked forward to. It was another part of the healing, another way to nurture myself instead of giving everything I had away. As I cleared the last of Clara's things from the apartment, her old books, some clothes, photos that had once seemed so important, I felt a strange sense of clarity. The apartment had been a constant reminder of our life together, of all the things I had been willing to overlook in order to keep the peace. It felt like I was finally shedding the old skin that had trapped me for so long. But I didn't just clear out the physical clutter. I started writing too. Every night, I sat down and journaled. I reflected on everything I had gone through, everything I had learned about trust, loyalty, and betrayal. I wrote about the things I wished I had done differently, and the things I never should have allowed to happen. But most importantly, I wrote about the lessons I had learned from my marriage. One of the first things I realized was that I had lost myself in the process. I had become so consumed with Clara's happiness, with fixing her dreams and patching up the holes in her plans, that I had forgotten what it felt like to truly care for myself. Every decision I made had been filtered through her needs, but now I was making choices for me. And it felt empowering. The more I wrote, the more I understood that I wasn't just dealing with the end of my marriage, I was rebuilding my identity. I wasn't the husband who was always putting someone else's needs first. I wasn't the man who let another person's insecurities and manipulations define him. I was someone who deserved respect, someone who had the right to be selfish sometimes, and not in a bad way. Selfish in the sense that I could finally choose my own path. I stopped expecting closure from Clara. I stopped waiting for her to apologize or to explain herself. I realized that I didn't need her validation anymore. The only closure I needed was from myself. And it came slowly, piece by piece, as I let go of the anger and disappointment. I felt a sense of peace I hadn't known in years. It wasn't just a relief from the stress and turmoil of the marriage. It was a deeper peace, the kind that comes when you start listening to your own needs again. The kind that comes when you stop looking for answers from someone else and start finding them within. In a way, the silence in my apartment became my therapy. It wasn't empty. It was full of possibility. And for the first time in a long time, I realized I didn't need anyone else to fill it. Through the early mornings, the quiet meals, and the long nights of writing, I had rebuilt myself. I was stronger now, more self-aware. And for the first time in ages, I wasn't trying to prove anything to anyone. Not to Clara, not to anyone who had ever doubted me. I was just me, and that was enough. It had been a few months since I made the decision to walk away from Clara and everything she had dragged me through. The emotional fallout, the lies, the betrayal. It all felt like a chapter that I could finally close. I was rebuilding slowly but surely, and for the first time in a long time, I was no longer carrying the weight of someone else's expectations or manipulation. The emptiness I had feared so much in the beginning had started to feel like space for me to grow. I didn't need a replacement for Clara. I didn't need anyone to fix me. I had already done that for myself. One evening, I found myself in a small, quiet bookstore downtown. I wasn't looking for anything in particular. The shelves were lined with books I had no intention of reading, but somehow being surrounded by stories, even if they weren't mine, made me feel less alone. It was a brief escape, something to get lost in. I wandered between the aisles, my mind occupied with little else besides the soft murmur of pages being turned by other visitors, when I found myself at the fiction section. I wasn't sure why, but I pulled a book off the shelf and opened it. As I read the first few lines, I noticed a woman standing next to me, also scanning the titles, also absorbed in the small world of the bookstore. We briefly locked eyes, and for a moment, I felt an odd connection. Not one of attraction, but something simpler, something almost refreshing. She smiled at me, a fleeting, unforced smile, as if she was sharing this little corner of the world with me, even though we were strangers. "Finding something interesting?" she asked, her voice warm and free of any pretense. It wasn't the kind of question I was used to hearing. Most people, especially in social settings, always had something calculated in their tone. But she wasn't trying to impress anyone. She wasn't looking for validation. She was simply present. I nodded, and for a second, I forgot all the pain, all the history with Clara. It wasn't a moment that changed everything, but it was a moment where I realized that life could still be simple, still be free of complications. I didn't have to constantly fill the silence with distractions or people who didn't truly see me. It was enough just to be there. "Yeah," I said, closing the book. "Just looking." She smiled again, and that was all. We exchanged a few more words, just brief pleasantries, and then she walked away, disappearing between the aisles. I stood there for a moment, the feeling lingering. I didn't need to chase after her. I didn't need to seek a connection to fill a void. The brief encounter reminded me that there were still simple moments, authentic moments, and those were the ones worth holding on to. In that instant, I realized something profound. Clara was a chapter in my life, just a chapter, not the end, not the whole story. I had spent so much time trying to close that chapter in a way that would give me closure, But what I didn't realize was that life was already moving on, with or without her. The small, genuine encounter with that woman in the bookstore wasn't about finding a replacement for Clara or anyone else. It was about embracing that I was enough on my own. I had learned to choose myself, and that was the real turning point. I had rebuilt my life, piece by piece. And as I left the bookstore, I didn't feel like I was running from the past anymore. I wasn't afraid of what was next. I wasn't looking to be fixed. I was just ready to keep moving forward, on my terms. Free from illusions, free from everything that had once held me back. The future was mine to write.